Picture this. You're 12 years old, sleeping peacefully in your family's modest home in a small Bulgarian village, when suddenly the thunder of hooves shatters the morning silence. Your mother's scream pierces the air as Ottoman officials burst through your door, their silk robes pristine despite the long journey, their eyes scanning you with the cold calculation of merchants evaluating precious cargo. Within hours, you're chained to other boys in a cart rolling toward Istanbul, leaving behind everything you've ever known for a destiny you cannot yet imagine. Your tears mix with the dust of the road as the familiar mountains of your homeland fade into memory. The older boys whisper warnings about what awaits at the palace, stories so unbelievable they sound like fever dreams. But as the golden domes of Istanbul rise on the horizon, you're about to discover that the Ottoman Empire's greatest secrets weren't hidden in treasure vaults or military plans. They were concealed behind the marble walls of Topkapi Palace, in chambers where beauty became currency, where innocence was systematically harvested, and where young boys like you were transformed into something the world had never seen before. Before we dive into these forgotten stories that history textbooks conveniently ignore, if you're fascinated by the dark truths hiding behind imperial grandeur, smash that like button and subscribe for more content like this. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. It's incredible that we're exploring these buried secrets together from all corners of the world, connected by our shared hunger for the stories they don't want us to know. What you're about to hear isn't just another tale of Ottoman excess. This is the systematic blueprint for how an empire turned human suffering into administrative efficiency, how they weaponized beauty and youth in ways that would make modern traffickers seem like amateurs. The boys who disappeared into these palace walls weren't just servants or soldiers. They became something far more disturbing, and their story reveals the true cost of building one of history's most powerful empires. Let's start with the machine that fed this system. The devshirme wasn't just taxation, it was legalized kidnapping on an industrial scale. Every few years, Ottoman officials would sweep through Christian villages across the Balkans like human locusts, armed with ledgers and chains. They weren't looking for gold or grain. They were hunting for something far more valuable: boys between 7 and 20 years old, with the right combination of intelligence, beauty, and that indefinable quality that marked them as suitable for palace service. The selection process was terrifyingly sophisticated. These weren't random raids by barbaric soldiers. The officials conducting the devshirme were trained specialists who could evaluate a child's potential with a glance. They examined bone structure like art dealers appraising sculptures, tested reflexes and intelligence through carefully designed challenges, and above all, they looked for that particular type of beauty that would serve the empire's most twisted purposes. Imagine being the parent who opens their door to find these men examining your son like livestock. The officials might praise your boy's clear skin, his bright eyes, his quick responses to their questions. You realize with growing horror that your child's gifts, the very qualities that make you proud, are precisely what makes him valuable to them. The mathematics of desperation become brutally clear. Resist and watch your entire family die, or surrender your son and hope he survives whatever awaits in the capital. The boys selected for the devshirme weren't chosen randomly. Christian families were specifically targeted because their children could be converted to Islam without conflicting loyalties to existing Muslim families or tribal structures. This created a class of administrators and soldiers whose only allegiance was to the Sultan who had saved them from their inferior Christian origins, or so the official narrative claimed. In reality, it created a generation of psychologically damaged individuals whose entire identity had been systematically destroyed and rebuilt according to imperial specifications. The journey to Istanbul was your first education in powerlessness. Chained together in long lines, you marched for weeks across landscapes that should have been beautiful: rolling hills, ancient forests, sparkling rivers. But all you saw was the iron around your neck and the growing distance from everything that had ever mattered to you. The boys who couldn't keep up simply disappeared. No ceremony, no explanation. One day they were stumbling beside you, and the next morning their chains hung empty. The older boys, those who had survived previous transports, whispered stories about what awaited in the capital. Some spoke of the Janissary Corps, the elite military units where boys could earn honor and advancement through martial prowess. Others mentioned the palace school, where exceptional students received educations that rivaled anything available in Europe. But there were darker whispers too, stories about boys who vanished into the palace's inner chambers and were never seen again. Tales of transformation so complete that parents wouldn't recognize their own children. When you finally glimpsed Istanbul's skyline, the sight should have been magnificent. The soaring minarets, the massive dome of Hagia Sophia, the sprawling complex of Topkapi Palace stretching along the Bosphorus. This was the heart of an empire that stretched from Hungary to Yemen. But all you felt was a hollow dread settling in your stomach like a stone. This magnificent city represented the death of your old life and the birth of something you couldn't yet comprehend. The initial selection at the palace was even more humiliating than the village raids. Ottoman officials divided the surviving boys based on perceived potential, examining you like horses at market. They checked your teeth, tested your grip strength, evaluated your facial features with clinical detachment. The most beautiful and intelligent were separated for special consideration, a distinction that felt like a death sentence rather than an honor. Those chosen for the Enderun school were told they were fortunate. This was the most prestigious educational institution in the empire, producing the administrators, diplomats, and governors who kept the Ottoman machine functioning. The curriculum was genuinely impressive. Mathematics, astronomy, literature, history, multiple languages, military strategy, and artistic pursuits that would make Renaissance scholars envious. But this education came with a price that had nothing to do with academic rigor. The palace complex that became your new world was a maze of marble corridors, ornate chambers, and hidden passages where danger lurked around every corner. You were housed in dormitories within the palace walls, separated from the outside world by layers of guards, protocol, and psychological conditioning that made escape not just difficult, but literally unthinkable. The dormitory where you would sleep stretched before you like a gilded prison, lined with narrow beds covered in silk that felt your skin. You're like chains against first night in the palace. You lay awake listening to sounds that would become the soundtrack of your new existence. The soft weeping of homesick boys trying to muffle their tears. Whispered conversations in languages you didn't recognize. The footsteps of older students and supervisors prowling the halls after lights out. You clutched the small wooden cross your mother had pressed into your hand as you were taken away. But by morning, even that last connection to your former life would be discovered and confiscated. The transformation began immediately, designed to break down your individual identity and reconstruct you as an instrument of imperial will. You were given a new name, Ahmed, and told to forget your Christian origins completely. The ceremony of conversion was conducted with great ceremony, as if you had chosen this path voluntarily, but everyone knew choice had nothing to do with it. You repeated words in Arabic that you didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. The boy who had herded sheep in Bulgarian mountains was dead, and in his place stood a future servant of the Ottoman state. But the Enderun school wasn't just about creating administrators. It was about manufacturing a very specific type of human being. The palace operated on a complex hierarchy where advancement depended not merely on academic achievement, but on your ability to please your superiors in ways that no textbook would ever describe. The unspoken curriculum was far more demanding than any formal lesson, and failure meant more than poor grades. Your first lesson in the palace's true nature came from Selim, an older student who had been in the system for 4 years. He approached you during your second week, his manner carrying both menace and promise. He explained how things really worked, how the most successful students formed special relationships with their teachers and supervisors, how certain boys received better food, warmer clothes, and protection from the harsher aspects of palace life. All they had to do in return was show proper gratitude through acts of service that went far beyond academic duties. Or the palace's sexual ecosystem was intricate and predatory, operating according to rules that had been refined over generations. Older students preyed upon newcomers, wielding their experience and connections as weapons of coercion. Teachers and palace officials maintained their own networks of favoured boys, creating webs of dependency and exploitation that touched every corner of the institution. What made this system particularly insidious was how completely it was integrated into daily life, not hidden away as shameful secrets, but woven into the very fabric of palace culture. You watched other boys navigate these treacherous waters with varying degrees of success. Dmitri, a Greek boy taken from a fishing village, learned quickly to smile and flirt with the right people. Within months, he had fine clothes, private tutoring sessions, and a room to himself, but his eyes hay or family. When gone dead, and he no longer spoke of home new boys arrived, he looked at them with the same calculating gaze that older students had once turned on him. Mikhail, from a Serbian farming family, took the opposite approach. He refused all advances, endured beatings and punishments, and gradually faded into a ghost-like existence. He performed his studies mechanically, ate his meagre rations in silence, and seemed to disappear a little more each day. One morning, his bed was empty, and no one mentioned his name again, as if he had never existed at all. You tried to find a middle path between collaboration and resistance, accepting some advances to survive, while desperately trying to preserve some core of yourself that remained untouched. But the palace was designed to make such compromises impossible. Every day brought new tests, new choices between degradation and destruction, new ways that the system sought to remake you entirely in its own image. The physical education was as rigorous as the academic, but it served curriculum, purposes beyond creating capable administrators. You learned horseback riding, archery, sword fighting, and wrestling, skills that would serve you well in military or civilian careers. But these lessons also served to display your developing physique to evaluating eyes, turning athletic achievement into another form of performance for those who controlled your fate. The palace's internal economy created additional layers of exploitation and dependency. Small privileges, better food, warmer clothing, access to books or musical instruments became precious commodities in your restricted world. These rewards were distributed not based on merit alone, but on your willingness to participate in the unspoken exchanges that kept the system functioning. You learned to calculate the cost of every advantage, understanding that nothing came without a price that extended far beyond academic effort. European visitors who glimpsed this hidden world left accounts that hint at the reality behind the educational facade. A Venetian ambassador noted the unusual closeness between palace officials and their young charges, describing scenes that made him profoundly uncomfortable. He wrote of boys dressed in silk and jewels attending to older men with a familiarity that suggested relationships extending well beyond appropriate teacher-student interactions. The ghosts of these forgotten boys still walk the marble corridors of Topkapi Palace today, now a museum where tourists admire the architectural grandeur while remaining blind to the human cost that built this empire's glory. Their stories echo through time as a reminder that behind every civilization's achievements lie countless unnamed victims whose suffering made those achievements possible. We tell ourselves we've evolved beyond such barbarism, but the same systems of exploitation exist today, hidden better, sanitized by legal complexity, but fundamentally unchanged. The boy torn from his Bulgarian village died for the same reason children disappear into modern trafficking networks, because societies have always found ways to rationalize the unthinkable when it serves their interests.